Hello, my name is Nestor Damas Guerra and I come from the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. And today I'm going to be talking about gender representation in graded readers, a Corpus-based study of character depictions in English and Spanish texts. First, I want to thank this Cineco Congress for letting me participate in this fourth edition. Now we can see an overview of the points that will be talked about in this presentation, and we'll begin with the introduction. So, although extensive reading remains a foundational practice in second language education, the cultural and societal narratives embedded in widely used reading material often receive limited scrutiny. Graded readers, tailored to suit various proficiency levels, are commonly employed to support language learning, but their potential influence in either reinforcing or questioning societal norms, particularly around gender, warrants further investigation. This study aims to examine gender representation in these adapted texts using a linguistic corpus based methodology. The research had basically two objectives: to analyze linguistic representation of gendered characters, to investigate how male and female characters are linguistically represented in a selected sample of English and Spanish graded readers, and to enable precise comparative analysis, to work with a limited number of texts, allowing for accurate identification and tracking of character references and enabling a systematic comparison of how gender is portrayed across languages and proficiency levels. The methodology was utilizing a corpus-based methodology, utilizing the Langsbox application to conduct systematic linguistic analysis across a selected sample of graded readers in English and Spanish. The software enables the extraction of relevant linguistic patterns associated with character representation. The first area of analysis focuses on the interpersonal dimension of metadiscourse, specifically examining how characters are constructed through linguistic devices such as hedges, like perhaps or seems, boosters such as definitely and clearly, and attitude markers such as unfortunately or surprisingly. These features are analyzed both in the characters' own speech and in the narrator's discourse about them, to assess how certainty, subjectivity, and stance are distributed across gender lines. The second line of investigation involves a frequency analysis of adjectives most commonly associated with principal male and female characters. By comparing the descriptive language used in reference to each gender, the study aims to identify potential patterns in characterization and evaluate whether these linguistic tendencies align with or challenge traditional gender roles embedded in educational reading materials. Now, continuing with the results. The analysis revealed several key trends, particularly within the English language corpus. Male characters were, in general, more fully developed than female characters. They were described with more detail, received more attributes, and were associated with a wider emotional range. In contrast, female characters were often minimally described, with some instances where even basic references such as pronouns were limited or absent. Additionally, the use of boosters and mitigators such as very slightly somewhat was notably scarce across both male and female character descriptions, contrary to expectations. Importantly, female characters were not portrayed as weaker or inferior, but rather they were simply less visible in the narrative through under description. However, the level of character importance varied depending on the individual story, as in some texts, female characters took on central roles, while in others, male characters dominated. This variability made it difficult to establish a consistent pattern regarding gender dominance across the corpus. A more substantial limitation was observed when comparing the English and Spanish corpora. The English text relied primarily on narration, allowing for character elaboration. In contrast, the Spanish text consisted predominantly of dialogue with minimal narration, resulting in a significant lack of descriptive content. This structural difference hindered any meaningful comparative analysis of gender portrayal between the two languages. Now, continuing with the discussion. These results offer valuable insights into how gender representation is subtly embedded in the text used for educational purposes, particularly in the context of English as a foreign language and Spanish as a foreign language. Graded readers are widely employed in language classrooms, not only to build linguistic skills, but also as tools for cultural exposure and the development of reading habits. As such, they play a formative role in how learners, especially in the case of young learners, begin to internalize social roles and cultural norms conveyed through language. The underdevelopment of female characters in some of the English texts suggests that gender biases may be reproduced even in simplified educational materials. While the intention behind graded readers is pedagogical, their narratives may carry implicit messages about gender visibility and emotional expression, messages that students can observe unconsciously. On the other hand, the Spanish text's emphasis on dialogue and lack of descriptive content may reflect different narrative conventions, but it also limits opportunities for learners to encounter diverse and nuanced character portrayals in their first language. These findings highlight the importance of critically examining the material selected for EFL education, not just for language level or vocabulary range, but also for the social and cultural messages they convey. As educators, we should consider how these texts shape learners' worldviews, including perceptions of gender roles. Concludingly, this study set out to examine how gender is portrayed in graded readers written in English and Spanish, and whether these portrayals might subtly reflect or transmit societal gender norms to young readers. While some notable patterns were observed, such as the greater descriptive detail and emotional depth given to male characters in English, or the lack of narrative elaboration in Spanish text, the overall findings were inconclusive. Gender representation varied significantly from text to text, as some focused more on male characters, others on female ones. Moreover, the use of gender descriptions such as adjectives, adverbs, bolsters, and mitigators also lacked consistency, making it difficult to define a clear trend, or declare one gender as being more represented or more stereotyped than the other. Moreover, this lack of clarity is in part due to the methodological limitations, as our corpus based analysis allows us to identify word patterns and linguistic frequencies, but it does not capture the narrative nuance and context essential to understanding character development or deeper gendered dynamics. In many cases, a more precise comparison would have required a complete close reading of each text, something beyond the scope of a corpus tool alone. To improve this line of research, future studies should combine quantitative corpus analysis with qualitative narrative analysis. A mixed methods approach would allow for both broad linguistic patterns and deeper interpretative insights to emerge. Additionally, working with a more thematically or structurally consistent corpus, such as text from a single publisher, series, or reading level, would reduce variability and strengthen comparative validity. Finally, thank you very much for listening.